Welcome back to Nothing But the Truth. I'm your host, Trudy Stern, and this week we are joined by Michael Sobolik, a distinguished expert on foreign policy and national security. Michael previously served as a legislative aide for Senator Ted Cruz, who we've had on the show in the previous episodes. He worked on critical policy issues, and he now continues his impactful work at the Hudson Institute. For those unfamiliar, the Hudson Institute is a leading think tank dedicated to promoting American leadership and global stability through research and policy solutions. Michael is a leading expert on critical national security issues, including the threats posed by TikTok and DeepSeek. His insights on these pressing challenges, along with his deep understanding of the US-China relations, make him an invaluable voice in today's geopolitical landscape. Michael, we're thrilled to have you on the show to share your insights on the pressing challenges facing the United States and the world today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So we've heard now in the past week all of these news feeds about DeepSeek and Chinese entering the AI field. Could you tell us a little bit about that and explain what that means for us?
Of course. So maybe we can start by backing up for a second and defining some of the basic terms, like what is artificial intelligence? What does it mean for our lives today? And then we can go from there. So I think back to my grandfather on my dad's side of the family. He was part of the Apollo space missions during the 60s and during the 70s, and he was a mathematician at NASA. And I remember like listening to my grandfather talk about those stories where those initial Apollo missions, like the math that got Americans to the moon, initially was not done by a computer. Those were actual humans in mission control and NASA writing these things down and solving these problems. And when you brought computers into the Apollo missions, these giant machines would take up the space of an entire room. Like we think of computers today and we take for granted the technological development of these incredible machines. They started as this massive thing, but now they can fit essentially in the palm of your hand. And over time, as technology has increased and as the computing power of these machines have astronomically increased in this like algorithmic rate, we've been able to do more. And because we've been able to do more, the frontier of what computers mean for human life is changing. It's no longer, I can hold a calculator in my hand, and instead of thinking what does 5 times 20 equal and do the mental math, I can just do all of that in the palm of my hand in a very basic calculator. But as computers have developed and evolved, and as the computing power and speed of these machines have grown, we are now asking ourselves new questions in the 21st century. It's not just how can we offload some of these annoying mental tasks to a rote machine that we can save maybe a few minutes of our time every single day. We are now at the stage where we're asking ourselves, can we make these machines not only as smart as a human being, but even smarter than a human being? And even a step beyond that, what if we had the ability to put 20,000 Albert Einstein-like brains in one room and have them to be constantly thinking and problem solving? That is a really bizarre mental image to have in your head, but that is the future of AI. When we talk about like artificial general intelligence, that's a term that a lot of people will throw around. It basically means that we're trying to train computers to be as smart problem solvers as humans are. And eventually, like way in the future, people are talking about the sentient side of computers, which is bizarre, like that we're even talking about the emotional state of stuff. But we are on the brink of some incredible developments. And we were already seeing this in AI, artificial intelligence. So you asked about DeepSeek, like how does DeepSeek fit into all of this? The United States has been at the forefront of developing artificial intelligence. There are a lot of different models out there. People may be familiar with ChatGPT. Google has their own program called Gemini. Then there are a number of others too. But this DeepSeek AI model from China just came out of nowhere. And on the date of Donald Trump's inauguration on January 20th, they released that they were able, they claim, on a shoestring budget with old generation computer chips to produce an AI model that is essentially just as efficient as some of the publicly available ones in the United States. And it was made huge waves, and it had an economic impact in the US too, because it basically said this Chinese startup essentially is more efficient and just as powerful as these American giants of AI. That was the initial impression, so it caused quite a stir.
Well, okay, so do you think that the timing was coincidental? I mean, it seems pretty coincidental to me, but am I just reading into it?
My honest answer is I don't know, but I'll put it this way: I wouldn't put anything past the Chinese Communist Party, because listen, like, as your listeners know from all the incredible guests you've had on previously, there's really no such thing as a private company in China today. That just does not exist. Every single company owes political allegiance and legal compliance to the Chinese Communist Party. So if the party says, hey, you need to do this or you need to do that, you need to do it. And you know what, like, even if you don't get that directive, you know what the political incentives are in the field that you're operating in. So maybe it was an intended signal, maybe it wasn't, I don't know. But regardless, message has been received in the United States that the Chinese Communist Party, I mean, we already knew this, of course, like, they want to dominate every single competitive space, including AI. But this was a shot across the bow because it signified that they're trying to do a lot more on the software side with a lot less on the hardware side. And they're pretty successful.
So if you could explain that hardware versus software side, firstly, but the amount of money that it cost them to create DeepSeek, they're claiming it was $6 million. Now, our industry here in the United States, we've spent what, $100 billion? So that's 1,000 times more efficient than us. Like, what does that mean? That's strength, that's power, that's superiority. That's a major, bold statement. So how do you rationalize that?
Sure. So let's talk about the cost side first, and then we'll get into the hardware and software side. So on the cost, number one, it is a very good starting point for every single American to treat any sort of cost estimate from the People's Republic of China with a healthy dose of skepticism. We know that they play around with their economic numbers all the time, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if the $6 million figure is perhaps either on the extreme end, a concoction; on the more conservative end, maybe they're fibbing, fudging a little bit. But even if that's happening, what they're getting at is something that is actually happening, which is that it's highly likely, we can't confirm this because we don't know for sure, but it is highly likely that DeepSeek stole technology from OpenAI. So OpenAI is one of the most forefront entities, American companies who are in the AI development and competitive race, and they have this model. And what seems to have happened is that DeepSeek was able to get through the back door and build their own model based on OpenAI's. We talk a lot about how the Chinese Communist Party will engage in intellectual property theft from American companies. This is a long-standing concern. We've been talking about this even as long ago as 2015, like 2014. Like, the American companies have seen time and time again in so many different sectors, they're on the cutting edge of developing something valuable, and then they see that exact product in a showroom in Shanghai or Shenzhen, and they're like, wait, that's my technology. What is this doing here in this Chinese like expo? And it seems that DeepSeek was able to do this with OpenAI's development. And here's why that matters. Think about like pharmaceuticals. The price that you pay for the actual medicine that you get at the drugstore is, generally speaking, very affordable. But what makes the pharmaceutical industry so expensive beyond like government regulations is the research and development of figuring out what the right medicine is. The medical trials, finding the right combination of different ingredients to get the medicine you need, and all of the failed experiments along the way, that research and development is so expensive. So if you are able to steal that information from a competing company and then just produce something you already know is going to work, you don't have to spend all of that money on research and development. So this is like the upending thing about DeepSeek that a lot of people are concerned about. They are potentially, like, this might be a bit of an exaggeration, but it's helpful to make a point. It's basically upending the cost structure of artificial intelligence, getting all of the benefit of American R&D and then a Chinese company making it more efficient and benefiting from all of that innovation without having to pay for it. So like, and it's basically free for the world, but we're the ones as America paying for that innovation, which is not good for us, but it's great for Chinese entities like DeepSeek. But here's why, and I'll make this quick. Here's why I'm not too pessimistic about the outlook for this. I talked about hardware and software a few minutes ago. DeepSeek was able to achieve this efficient machine by really creative software solutions, by finding ways to get its system to solve problems more quickly and more efficiently with slow hardware. And when I say hardware, I mean semiconductors. This gets into a policy area that maybe your listeners have heard politicians or policy people talk about before: export controls. Export controls is basically when the United States says, this is something we don't want to send to like China or Russia or North Korea or Iran because of a national security reason. Semiconductors, which are the part of any computer that do like the processing, the computation, the problem solving, we don't want to send our most cutting end, most powerful, fastest semiconductors to China because we want to win the technological race. What DeepSeek was able to do was use old semiconductors to build this model that's really efficient. That is concerning on the one hand, but on the other hand, American AI companies can benefit from DeepSeek's innovations with efficiency and use that for our powerful semiconductors and get even further ahead than DeepSeek is right now. So like that long-term game, I think, favors America.
Very happy. Wait, go ahead. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just going to say the point of all of this, like, I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, because like the really important point of all of this is that what you're seeing is a race. You are seeing Chinese companies like DeepSeek trying to leapfrog ahead of American companies that have done the hard work of R&D. And listen, like, that's concerning, but American companies also get to benefit from the efficiencies of Chinese companies like DeepSeek, and we have the hardware computing power of the most powerful chips that China doesn't have. So at least right now, I'm not too concerned, but it really shows this AI race that's happening.
How is it that China can't obtain those chips?
Here's why. So this goes back to the Trump administration. The first Trump administration was going after a Chinese company called Huawei. Maybe your listeners have heard of it, maybe they haven't. It's basically a global powerhouse of a telecommunications company that has been able to really muscle out a lot of its competition. Like when you look up and you see like phone wires, and maybe you'll see like 5G towers when you're driving down the highway, all around the world, Huawei wants to be the ones that are wants to be the one that's dominating telecommunications, because it's great for CCP surveillance. It's great to like for their spying, for their espionage. It can be very useful and impactful for the Chinese military and their intelligence services. The Trump administration realized the national security threat, and they said, we can be creative with export controls. There are a whole bunch of different components that go into the hardware of Huawei's products, let alone the computers that are training AI systems. But the Trump administration realized, even though we don't build semiconductors, there are some components of a semiconductor that are only made and developed in the United States. And then the Trump administration said, hey, that's a hook. We can introduce a new requirement, which they called the Foreign Direct Product Rule, that basically said for any company anywhere in the world that wants to sell this semiconductor to China, you need to come to the Department of Commerce in Washington, D.C. first and get our permission. And if you don't do that, you are going to be subject to massive fines. So we were able, through very creative policymaking, to prohibit anybody from selling a certain kind of technology to China. And this is what we're doing with semiconductors for AI right now. We're basically saying anyone in the world, like big companies like NVIDIA that sell these semiconductors, you better not sell the newest and the fastest to China. And we have the ability to make sure that you don't do it.
Did the Biden administration enforce that particular rule?
By and large, yes, with a few exceptions. It's interesting. I actually had the opportunity at one point to sit down and talk with the Undersecretary of Commerce in the Biden administration that was responsible for this exact policy portfolio. And listen, like Republicans and Democrats, thankfully on both sides of the aisle, generally understand why this is important. And listen, there are a whole bunch of areas where people on the right, people on the left will disagree on China policy. On the tech side and the AI side, it's not that there's universal agreement, but from the past 5 years that I've been working on these issues outside of government in Washington, I've seen enough for me to be at least reasonably optimistic that folks on both sides get that this matters. I would not say that the Biden administration did this perfectly by any means, but they definitely tried. And at the very end of their administration, they introduced a new rule that would make it even harder for China to get these chips, which I think is a good thing.
That's really great. For the listeners that are tuning in late, I just want to tell you all that we are here with national security expert Michael Sobolik discussing all of the issues regarding DeepSeek. So I want to ask you a different question now. We've heard now a lot about the development of DeepSeek. What does that mean for us from a national security angle? It seems like that poses a lot of risks. Are they destroying us from within? Are they surveillancing all of, important people or not important people? What is it for our national security? And are they also then moving a step further in controlling our information and using it for propagandic purposes? Or can they, is actually the question.
These questions are crucial for anyone to ask and understand. And I'll start first by saying, I feel like when you're looking at your phone or when you're looking at your computer screen, it is so easy to not have any filter in your mind to ask the question, if I'm about to download this app, who developed it? What are the terms of service for this thing I am about to put on this phone, essentially this supercomputer that lives in my pocket or my purse? Is this a reliable company? Where are they based out of? Who do they answer to? Like, I feel like these are questions, like if you're a parent and you're looking for a babysitter, you do your due diligence, right? Like my wife and I have a 3-year-old. We would not ask just anybody to come into our house and watch our son. But it is astounding to me, and I count myself as people who do this. It is just astounding to me how little question or how few questions we ask about the things we put on our own phone. and on our computer. So if you read DeepSeek's terms of service, which I have done, they are explicit that the data that they receive from your account that you set up from DeepSeek and like the queries that you have with this AI model, that data is saved on servers located in the People's Republic of China. So you better know, if you use DeepSeek, China is getting your data, and it's using your data, and certainly in a whole host of ways we don't fully know, but you are actually in some ways like helping this Chinese AI machine get better and stronger, and it's learning about you in the process, which I think is concerning. But to me, at least an equally, if not even more concerning side beyond the data security is the information side, the discourse side. The Chinese Communist Party is I would not hesitate to call it an evil regime. It is also a deeply insecure regime because they feel the need to control speech and discourse about themselves, not just within China, but everywhere around the whole world. They call that discourse power, the ability not just to like control what people say about the Chinese Communist Party, but their real goal is to control what you think about it. And that is a higher degree of control. Having a thought that you think is original to you, but really came from someone else or somewhere else. That's what the Chinese Communist Party is trying to do. And DeepSeek is part of that. Because if you ask DeepSeek, what is Tiananmen Square? Say something critical about Xi Jinping, it won't. I've seen videos of people trying to, and I'm sure many of your listeners have seen this too. It will not say anything critical about the CCP. In some cases, it starts to, and then it just deletes everything it just said, or it'll say, I'm not programmed to do that. Like, this is an example of the Chinese Communist Party trying to control what is spoken, what is not spoken globally about itself. And that is a big concern.
So how do you control this? I know you spoke a little bit before about the law on the books now that you can't, any country that sells a certain type of chip or a component of a chip would be fined heavily. So that's one way to control, the advancement in China. But really, what can we do? What can we do here?
So I would say two things. Number one, it's going to be the controls that we have to make sure that these very powerful semiconductors don't end up in China. It's going to be more than just saying, okay, company X, company Y, you can't sell this stuff to China or to an intermediary that will then sell it to China. We need to make sure that the companies and the countries that we are partnering with, that we are sending these things to, like the closest of US allies, like the British and others, we have got to make sure that they can control and secure their facilities. We need to make this is a global problem. This is not just Washington saying, okay, we have this great final rule that came out of commerce. Companies will have to comply with this. Job done. It's not going to be as simple as that. For anyone anywhere in the world that is purchasing these really powerful chips from NVIDIA and others, they need to be able to secure their facilities from smuggling. They need to make sure that anyone who has access to the physical rooms where these devices are vetted, secure, and safe, and that none of this will be stolen or pilfered. We have the AI. I'm not saying that AI is this magical crown jewel that is just going to solve everything in the 21st century. Like, it's not going to be that simple, but we are on the cusp of innovations that America has to win if we really want to be competitive with our adversaries. So we need our allies that align with us to protect this stuff. That's one. Number two, we need to keep innovating and investing and making sure that US companies are the ones that are breaking through the barriers that everyone else is stuck at. We have got to continue that pace and make sure that we're running faster, investing more, and getting better results than any competitors inside of the PRC.
That's a very optimistic perspective in a way, because it seems like we actually can win the race. But you say that we should keep investing, but when you see DeepSeek investing $6 million and getting so far, and we've invested $100 billion and have gotten where we are, it's almost a difficult. It's almost an oxymoron. We have to keep investing, and we've invested so much, and we've gotten to the exact point that China has gotten with $6 million. So how do you rationalize that statement?
Excellent question. Okay, so I will share how I will borrow from another expert I was listening to, and I think this is the best way to describe it. Think about AI innovation as a floor and a ceiling. The floor is the absolute minimum that you're able to accomplish with the resources that you have. The ceiling is breaking through to the next level of innovation. What DeepSeek did felt like a huge accomplishment, and it's very impressive. But what DeepSeek really did was raise the floor of what we thought these AI machines could accomplish. Keep in mind, DeepSeek does not have the most powerful hardware available that's out there. They have a generation or two behind. Their gains were not with breaking through things that other competitors hadn't done before in terms of intelligence of the machine. Their gains were in efficiency of the machine, which is great. That's useful, and we can benefit from that. But what AI companies in America, like ChatGPT and others, they have the ability to push through the ceiling. Why is that? Because of the hardware. We have the fastest, the most powerful semiconductors that the entities in China do not have. And with that capability, even though, yes, in this particular scenario, there are the cost differential is insane. Like, there's no denying that. But number one, they raised the floor. That's great. We can push through the ceiling, which they cannot do right now, which I think favors us. The second thing, which this is not going to be necessarily easy to do, but I think we can at least get better at it, is protecting the proprietary information of these American companies. Cybersecurity and like cyber hacking, it might be a slight oversimplification, but it generally favors the offensive actor, like the one who's trying to steal, because sometimes you don't know that your systems are penetrated. And this is a moving target. I know that the government is still figuring out ways to be helpful. Private sector actors are still figuring out how to protect themselves. This will be a challenge for American companies to better protect the back end of these systems. It's going to be a cat and mouse game. But the thing is, number one, we don't have a choice. We have to play that game. We've got to win it. And the fact that we have the capability to push through the ceiling, whereas companies like DeepSeek don't right now, I think that's something that it's valuable, and it should compel us to keep innovating.
So is there an investigation into who did you say they took the technology from?
OpenAI.
OpenAI. Like, is there an investigation into that company's personnel to see if somebody was actually a spy?
Investigation, yes. My understanding right now, and this is all fluid, this is all changing. My understanding right now is that it wasn't an inside job. It was DeepSeek finding a way not to go through the front door of ChatGPT, but to go through the back door to their proprietary systems, where instead of asking this system like one question at a time, like when you log it in, if any of you have talked to these like ChatGPT or like these AI machines, you ask them like one question at a time, or you can ask them a series of questions and then they'll run through it, then they'll pop out an answer, and then you just kind of have this back and forth with them. What DeepSeek apparently was able to do was to go through the back end and have like millions upon millions of like simultaneous queries and got like a ton of information about how OpenAI runs. And if you actually ask DeepSeek, like, what kind of AI machine are you? More often than not, it'll respond to you and say, I'm OpenAI. So like it even kind of admits in its own way that they stole this stuff from an American company. But yeah, it wasn't an inside job. They just found a backdoor way. And it's a moving target, but we got to find ways to close off that access.
Well, that is reassuring that we don't know to have spies within these companies. So happy to hear that. It almost, this concept and topic reminds me so much of preventing Iran from becoming nuclear. Iran is such a bad actor, and we've all focused so much attention on the nuclear deal, the Iran deal, and preventing them from becoming nuclear. All the while, they have tremendous capabilities outside of the nuclear that are so detrimental to society. But it seems like this is the same race, just another frontier.
This is the world we live in. And also too, I love that point because it underscores that these domains are connected. Like when we have a conversation about AI, it's not like that isn't going to have a bearing on nuclear weapons. It will. And when you really want to get into like potentially disturbing or scary scenarios about what could AI look like in the 21st century, what if an adversarial country decided to put the command and control of their nuclear weapons in the hand of an artificial intelligence computer or a machine? Like, what if AI and not human decision makers controlled nuclear targeting, launch authority? Like, these are the kinds of things that, like, again, getting way ahead of ourselves here, but these domains are going to intersect. And we're already seeing this. Earlier last year, one thing that came across my radar that was fascinating was both the US and China are integrating AI into drone warfare. Now, what does that mean? Imagine that you have a swarm of drones, not just one, two, or three, but like dozens or hundreds. And they are integrated with each other so that they're not just flying around in a random sense like flies, but they're actually coordinated on a mission. And then imagine that, like, if they're Chinese drones in the United States, like, takes out the computer on the ground in China that's controlling them, China is trying to program their drones that if they lose contact, that they're still able to complete their mission. That's crazy. Like, this is the kind of world that we're living in with warfare and artificial intelligence. This is where it's going. It's not just people staring on their computer screens trying to like make this artificial thing smart. This is going into warfare. And this is why, one of the big reasons why we have to win this race.
Wow, that is incredibly frightening to think of. And sadly, though, we've come to the end of our show. This has been unbelievably enlightening, Michael, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Michael Sobolik, for sharing your incredible insights. This has been an eye-opening conversation, and we're just getting started, because next week we're going to have Michael back for part 2 as we take a deep dive into the critical issues surrounding TikTok, what's really at stake, and why it matters for all of us. Make sure to tune in every Thursday night at 9:30 for another episode of Nothing But the Truth. If you've missed any part of tonight's show or want to catch up on past episodes, you can find them wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Trudy Stern. Truth matters. Freedom depends on it. Until next time, stay informed, stay vigilant, and keep seeking nothing but the truth.